What's up, guys? It's Lawrence with Maximum Freight, and I just wanted to cover a quick topic. I follow a lot of the trending topics on Reddit, other social media platforms, stuff like that. And obviously, right now with President Trump's reciprocal tariffs and additional tariffs that he's added on top of the ones he did during his first presidency, there's a lot of discussion about how those tariffs are assessed. Are there any ways to mitigate them? I don't want to say get around them. That kind of sounds like illegal and shady or whatever. But the main thing I wanted to talk about today was this question that I keep seeing come up where people are saying, hey, if I route my cargo, say it's from China, because right now, as of the time of this video, China's at like 145%. I think it's the highest. He's paused it recently for 90 days, but I don't think for China. So if I'm incorrect, just add that in the comments. But basically, China's the highest tariff right now, and a lot of people are facing a conflict because they're not really prepared to pay those tariffs. They were planning to pay something completely different. So this question comes up that, hey, if I import my goods that I usually import from China and I route it through another country, um, do I pay the tariff from the country that it last departs, right? Or if I route it somewhere else and I store it there for a little bit and I ship it from that area, does this change my tariff rate? And the short answer is it does not. Country of origin is sometimes mistaken for country of departure. So people are thinking of it in terms of where it's leaving, right? But you could have goods that were made in China and then ship them to Russia or Taiwan or somewhere in Europe, right? And then ship it out. And the country of origin is still going to be China because the goods were made in China. That's where when you say country of origin, it just means where the goods had their most significant and substantial change in their structure and their format. The transformation that made the goods valuable, that's really where country of origin is. Um, so the flip side to that is you could have something manufactured, say in Germany, and then you could ship it to China for whatever reason, research or maybe some kind of inspection or something like that, right? And then it ships from China to America. The country of origin is still Germany if the substantial value and transformation and the manufacturing happened in Germany, right? So it's not where it's shipping from, it's where the goods are being manufactured and where the value is being added. Now, you could theoretically have, say, raw materials or unfinished parts, things of that nature, shipped from China, go to a different country, um, and then have them final finished, machined or sewn or whatever, some kind of substantial transformation that takes place in another country from raw parts or raw material. And if the majority of the value is derived from that country, even though the raw material and the parts came from China, if most of the value is in the country where the goods were made, then that would change the country of origin. Country of origin is not a direct, it's not a super direct definition set by I mean, there is a definition, but if you go to the Customs and Border Protection website and you look up country of origin, they actually have many different cases and rulings on tons of different products that were made in different countries and transformed in different countries, and they have different rulings based upon what happened. So it's like a very complex and intricate ruling. If you read from Customs and Border Protection, what is country of origin? They're just going to say country of manufacture, production, or growth of the article, right? And then this is pertaining to this video, does altering the article in a second country change the country of origin, right? So they have a specific definition of this. And number one is probably a little bit more relevant to what we're discussing. And their Customs and Border Protection is saying that if more work and materials added in another country, and then it constitutes what they call a substantial transformation, right? Which they define as creating something completely new, a new article, as they say, new article with a different name, character, and use is created, right? So if you read this, you're like, oh, okay, so now I know exactly what it is. And it's true. It's a pretty good definition of what it is. However, um, I think what I wanted to clarify on more, on what I said previously, where there's a lot of different rulings and things of that nature, is the interpretation of this based upon what your product is can vary greatly. And I'm going to show you on the next slide here. So if you go to here, which is rulings.cbp.gov, this is actual cases of people importing stuff where it was brought to the attention of Customs and Border Protection on assessing if a particular product underwent substantial transformation when going through another country, right? And this is what I mean, that it's a very complex issue. I mean, if you look at here, you're going back to like 1991. There's just tons of cases here, and many different products. There's stuff about there's electronics and gold and clothing and all kinds of stuff. And if you read it, it'll give you, like, I'm not going to read it to you. You guys can kind of read this if you want, because it's pretty boring. But it'll give you a case study where, like, there's some kind of gold jewelry that came from a certain country, and then it went to another country, and then it describes like what it went through, and then they'll break down the law and analysis of what Customs and Border Protection deemed if it was or was not substantial transformation. So that's more what I want to really clarify is, yes, there is a clear textbook definition, but that being said, I don't think it's enough to just to kind of wing it, right? Because if you go to their case studies, they're very in depth on how they came up with that assessment. So it's not really worth taking the chance. I would definitely double check, again, with a broker or Customs and Border Protection themselves. The advice that I give to people is, if you're not sure, you should contact Customs and Border Protection directly. They're actually surprisingly easy to get a hold of once you kind of figure out the right department, and they will help you. Like, you can email them directly, you can get them on the phone, and they will actually help you classify your goods, answer your questions directly, because they don't want you to make mistakes when you're filing customs entries for your goods entering the United States. They want it to be done properly, so they're actually very willing to help you. Might be a bit tricky to find the right department to speak to at first, but once you do it's actually surprisingly helpful. They're surprisingly helpful, and I'm going to leave some links in the description below where you can actually look up that information. The other thing I wanted to address was, you see a lot of people, and rightfully so, they're saying, hey, don't try to reroute your cargo and try to circumvent these duties. It's fraud, it's jail time. There's two things I want to point out here. Is it's fraud if you willfully and knowingly do it, and you're lying, and you lie about country of origin or any other part of your customs entry. That would be considered fraud, right? I don't think the people asking the question on social media platforms are willfully trying to commit fraud. I think what it is just from what I'm reading, it seems like it's a lack of understanding of country of origin, which is why I'm making this video, right? I think they just don't understand. I think they think that it's country of shipment, right? As I was talking about before. But they are saying that if you do that and customs believes that you are doing that willfully, that you can face jail time. And that is true, right? It is actually written in the U.S. Code. It is written in law that you can face up to 2 years if you willfully commit fraudulent information on your entry, and up to 20 years if it's I think if it's like counterfeit stuff, right? You can face up to 20 years. Now, that being said, like, if you made a mistake on your customs entry, would they just throw you in jail? On paper, yes, but typically my experience with customs is that they're going to do an investigation. They're going to see, like, did you knowingly do that? Was it a mistake? And usually they will give you some type of a warning, depending on how egregious the mistake or the error in entry was, right? So it's a sticky situation. Like I said, the best thing you can do, get a licensed custom broker, ask them the questions, go to Customs and Border Protection directly, ask them the questions. Customs and Border Protection breaks down your level of violation into a few different categories. So there's negligence, where you just made a mistake. There's gross negligence, which is, like, I guess, a bigger mistake, right? Like, you really should have done a little bit more due diligence, right? And then there's outright fraud. Okay. And so each one of those things carries a different penalty. Um, Obviously, negligence, I think, is like it's 20% here of the dutiable value, 40% for gross negligence, and then fraud obviously can be civil penalties and other things of that nature. Um, the reason though that I'm bringing this up is because some people on the forums are saying, "Oh, you're just going to go straight to jail," and I don't think that's necessarily the case because it's obviously very dependent on the nature of the violation. And also, there's something called prior disclosure, where say you're, I don't know, maybe you suspect you did your entry wrong or something wasn't quite right. You can approach Customs and Border Protection and say, hey, listen, I might have made a mistake here. And if you do that before they start a formal investigation or they come and notify you, if they do find you made a mistake, the penalties can be less. It can be mitigated if you approach them and they, you kind of admit to potentially making an error. Um, where the a 2-year penalty is stands is if you deliberately make false statements. That can be up to 2 years in jail. And I think the key here is that you're deliberately doing it, right? This is not negligence or gross negligence as we just viewed, right? This is just purely you knew better and you lied on your entry and your documentation. And the 20-year penalty, I think last time I said counterfeits and stuff like that. That's true, but I think the actual code is smuggling. So if you're smuggling stuff into the United States and you're not only are you just like, not putting something correct on the entry form, but you're literally hiding stuff like inside a container, air freight, whatever it is, and you're trying to pass it as something else. That's when you could actually face up to 20 years in of jail time. That's this the most serious would be smuggling. So add a link to all the sources you can look up to learn more about country of origin and the penalties and things of that nature, right? I think it's definitely good to just get a reasonable understanding of it. It's a complex issue, but don't go into it assuming. Um, don't go into it with assumptions. That's the biggest takeaway. Make sure you know. Make sure you're doing it properly. Get a customs broker. Get a get feedback from CBP themselves. And if you're wondering about how duties are assessed or where you can get an idea of how you can get your duties assessed, click on the next video where I'm going to explain some of the resources you can use to do that.